Crime is the sucker's road. Those who travel it end up in the gutter, the prison, or the grave, but they never learn. Hey everyone, this is Jeff of Tau Fledermaus. Today we are going to be testing another product from Warwolf Ordinance. And of course this is an unsponsored video. We're doing this for just informational and entertainment value. And what we have are these cartridges filled with an indelible UV powder. The powder is absolutely tenacious. The cartridges are designed to be used with their 5th Ops perimeter alarm. And there's a number of uses for this, from deterring and identifying package thieves, or identifying and deterring people from breaking into your shed or your garage or whatever. Before we get to the UV powder test, we're going to test using this orange chalk line powder. Now this allows me to give you a couple more examples of how the perimeter alarm is used, but it also limits how much of that nasty UV powder I got on my property. But as you can see, the orange chalk line powder shows up really well under a UV light. The perimeter alarm works in any position. It just takes a tug of the string to activate it. The orange powder also shows up really well on camera. The perimeter alarm makes a pretty startling pop, scaring the intruder, but it will not harm them in any way. It's not enough power there to do any damage. But it disperses the powder in a large cloud that is going to end up on the intruder. Even though the mannequin was thoroughly coated with orange powder, the results were not that impressive. There's just a few little spots on him that really showed up under the UV light. But this will give you a much better appreciation for the UV powder that they use in the identifier rounds. And I should note that the UV powder that they use is non-toxic, non-corrosive. You could get in your eyes and it won't burn your eyes. In fact, if you got it on you, you probably wouldn't even know you had it on you unless you used a black light or a UV light. Now in this test, we took a cardboard box and installed a smaller cardboard box full of dirt just to give it some weight. When the porch pirate sees this tempting box on your porch, he picks it up, not knowing that it's a trap. Until it's too late. And again, I'm using the orange powder because it shows up really well, and also I really didn't want to get the UV powder all over my porch. Again, we had good distribution of the powder, which is going to stick to the intruder's clothes. Now we'll demonstrate the actual UV identifier rounds. I highly recommend using gloves even when handling the cartridges right out of the package. I even wiped down this cartridge with a rag prior to filming this, and during the manufacturing process, some of that powder residue, just the residue, is enough to stick to your hands. And yes, it will leave identifiable fingerprints behind. This powder is incredibly difficult to get off your skin once it's on there, and even a tiny amount of the powder will end up on everything you touch. The UV identifier cartridges were considerably louder and much more energetic than my orange powder test cartridges. And again, I want to remind people that these are designed not to injure anybody. Just distribute that nasty UV powder all over the suspect. Now the majority of the powder just hit the perpetrator in the chest, but that's kind of deceptive because there's actually a large cloud forming around the suspect that is distributing that powder all over him. It also looked like it had enough energy to travel much further than that short distance, probably 20 or 30 foot cloud that would eventually get all over the suspect. And again, it only takes just a minute amount of that powder to ruin your day. And of course the perpetrator would have no idea that this UV powder was all over them. The powder has been distributed all over the perpetrator, all over his shirt, and even on the top of his head. And he may try to brush it off with his hands, and that's just going to spread it even further. It's going to end up on door handles, on his steering wheel, all over his car. There's no getting around this. You cannot wash this stuff off. It's that permanent. And I'll be honest with you, I was just phobic about making this video because this stuff, you don't see it on your hands, but you know it's there. The UV powder works on all skin types. Oily, dry, and regular skin. What'd you think I was gonna say? Now this test was done after sunset. It was still a little bit light out so I could still film, but dark enough that I was hoping that my UV flashlight would allow it to show up a little better. And I needed some light so I could film with a high-speed camera too. Now the UV flashlight worked pretty well. You could see the powder glowing in the air. With the UV cartridges, it was a little hard to distinguish between the smoke and the UV powder still. You could see why I opted to use the orange chalkline powder for some of the tests. The foam head was absolutely plastered with the UV powder, and it went way beyond onto the ground and just kind of covered the ground, and I really hope my cats don't go walking through that and dragging it into the house. But it had to be done. The things I do for you guys, huh? And of course, I need to show you what happens if you do get this on your skin. This is what it looks like after thoroughly washing my hands with soap and water. It looks like I never washed them at all. This is what it looks like after washing my hands with laundry detergent, to the point where my skin became slippery as the laundry detergent was starting to melt my skin a little bit. It's still there. I mean, it's a little bit better, but it still identifies me that I was in contact with this powder. Now I thought if I used bleach with a little bit of soap and water, you know, that would remove it. But nope, it's still there. It's a little bit better, but that stuff is still identifying me that I came in contact with this powder at some time. I even tried washing my hands with vinegar, thinking the acidic nature of the vinegar would remove it. And even a week later, the stuff is still on my hands. This stuff just does not come off. It's nasty, folks. And that was just from handling this cartridge when I was filming this video, before I even did the main test. Hopefully that gives you an appreciation of just how potent this powder is. Imagine getting a whole shelf full of it distributed all over your body. It would be a nightmare. I want to take a second to thank our Patreon supporters to keep our show going. And we're also on Subscribestar now if you don't like Patreon.
I don't know what you're talking about, officer. I was never near that house. I didn't steal any packages. What are you talking about, man?
Aye, you're coming down to the station house with me, young man. Grab your coat and your hat.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Always appreciate your support, even if it's just a thumbs up. Always enjoy reading your comments. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.